philosophy of mind is kind of a contemporary philosophy discipline that can be ultimately traced back to Descartes in the mind-body problem. But first, and I'll talk about how he created that. But first, let's talk about, traditionally in philosophy of mind, they'll identify two problems that philosophy of mind tries to deal with. One is what they call an easy problem. And the easy problem is, how does something like a physical machine, a brain, something physical, how could that physical system ever be the sort of thing that could learn or remember? Why is that an easy problem? Because AI, in some sense, has answered that. Well, we can make a physical system like a computer that seems to learn and remember things, has memory. So the hard problem then is, okay, but how could a physical system ever produce something like consciousness? Now, consciousness within philosophy of mind means awareness, qualitative awareness. There we go. What it's like experiences. I just realized the package you gave me is sitting on my desk at home. Because I looked in, I'm like, where are my markers at? Yeah, on my favorite. Well, for example, let's talk about consciousness. Consciousness is not simply stimulus and response. So traditionally conceived, rocks and plants don't have what it's like experiences. They're not conscious. And by the way, to be self-conscious is a special type of consciousness. It's being aware of yourself. Okay, so we don't mean, we mean more general. Consciousness is the what it like experiences or awareness when you experience something. For example, if you pour water on a rock, the rock's not having an experience of what it's like. Now, plants can respond. They can respond to positive stimuli like music. They tend to react negatively to mumble rap. That's why I'm trying to make this argument in my new paper. Mumble rap not only destroys human beings, but plants. No, I'm kidding. It's probably, yeah, you could probably do an experiment, and they're like, right? I'm sure you can find other music, too, that would warp it. And shrivel it up.
Modern country.
Yeah. But the thing is, they're not having a what it's like experience. When you pour water on, they may react negatively or positively, but they're not having an experience. Whereas animals and human beings have consciousness. When an animal drinks water or eats something, there's something it's like for them to eat. Just like any of you, when you eat something, you have a kind of qualitative experience. this tastes earthy to me. No, it's spicy. You're having these experiences. Plants and rocks don't have that. They don't have. So that's typically what consciousness is. So isn't it interesting and very difficult? How could a physical system like a brain or a computer ever produce consciousness? So do you see why this seems to be much easier to solve? AI does that for the most part. This seems to be, and we're going to get into AI. Could you ever make a computer that's actually intelligent? Not just it looks intelligent, but it has an inner life, qualitative experiences. We're going to get into that. But those are the hard and the easy problems. Okay, let me go over a variety of different contemporary theories in philosophy of mind, the kind of leading theories and the leading philosophers associated with. So these are some of the top philosophers in the world today, and they subscribe to these various theories, and I'm going to explain them briefly. So part of the issue that comes up, like I said, the mind-body problem. First of all, what is mind? And how does it relate to the physical body or system or brain? Those are issues that come up. And each philosopher is going to say something different. Reductive physicalism, also known as eliminative physicalism. Now, reductionism, we've already talked about this before with Aristotle, when I argued that Aristotle is an anti-reductionist. What does that mean? Well, when somebody says all human beings are is simply matter in motion. Love, it's not real, it's just dopamine. That's reduction. So whatever kind of phenomenal experience that you're having, or things on the macro, the large scale, like human beings, the attempt is to reduce that all the way down to microphysics. Because the assumption is physics, microphysics, is the most certain and definite of the sciences. So that's how you make a science out of something. You reduce higher level sciences to lower level sciences. So if you did sociology to anthropology, anthropology to biology, biology to chemistry, chemistry to physics, you've performed reduction. So you reduce the science down to its fundamental base. And also, the idea is that with reductive physicalism, that the things down at the bottom, the physical things, those are the things that are most real. These other things are kind of human categories. And so let's just get precise and reduce everything down to what is most precise and most real, the realm of physics. Okay, that's reductionism. So, of reductive physicalism, so you're a physicalist. I only believe that physical matter exists. Well, there's a lot of people that believe that, and there's various different theories and ways that you can go with that. A reductive is that all the stuff that you think is mind, and part of mind would be consciousness, mental thoughts, experiences of pain, self-awareness, desires, intentions, intentionality, and a limited physicalist is going to say, that stuff's not real. Let's eliminate it. How? By reducing it to... So, mind is simply the brain. And it's really the brain tricking itself into thinking that it's conscious and that it has a mental life. It's just basically like a computer. It's a physical system. It's a physical system that's sophisticated enough to kind of produce a parlor trick, a kind of a loop, and it makes it think that it's having these experiences of mental life, but it's not real. Okay. Daniel Dennett, which, didn't we show a video on Daniel Dennett, Where Am I? Did we do that in this class? What class was that? Where he's a brain and the bat and... Okay.
The video we watched was the one about icons.
Okay, that was a different class. Paul and Patricia Churchland are eliminative or reductive physicalists. So whatever you think's going on in your mental life, it's just the brain. Let's just reduce the... Okay. You then have non-reductionism of the variety emergentism. Because there's various theories of that says, no, you can never... And they call this high-level phenomena. And then the stuff down at the brain and the body and the physics is low level. An emergentist is going to argue that at the lower level, for example, physics, when things become complicated enough, you get new, we could call this properties as well. So low-level properties and high-level properties. When you get things at a certain level of complexity within physical systems, at the low level, it will produce an emergent phenomenon that is not contained or predictable by lower level events. The classic example H2O and water. When you bring two hydrogens together with an oxygen, you get new properties that emerge that you don't find in the atoms, the gaseous atoms. What you get now is new emergent properties like the property of being a liquid or a solid. An emergentist is going to argue the same. When your physical system gets to a certain level of complexity, like water molecule, you will get new properties emerged. And it's non-reductive because you cannot reduce those mental properties. They're not the same thing as the low-level properties. In other words, consciousness in the mind, according to non-reductivists, is not the same as the brain or the body or microphysics. Something entirely different. You get a new a thing. You can't have it without the subvening base. But just like you can't have 65 miles per hour on power without some sort of engine. But 65 miles per hour is not the same thing as an engine, is it? So the engine, whatever sort of engine you want to use, is the subvening base that makes it possible for new properties to emerge, which are different and cannot be reduced. 65 miles per hour cannot be reduced to engine parts. But you can't have it without some type of engine. Likewise, you cannot reduce mental phenomenon to brain and physics. But if you remove the brain, what do you think is going to happen to your mental life? Or if you smash up your brain a bit, it's not going to work. Okay, so you need it. But it's not the same sort of thing. John Searle he's actually a materialist who's both a non-reductive, so he's going to deny all of this stuff. But he's also an emergentist. And I wrote my PhD thesis on John Searle. And he's most famous for his argument against artificial intelligence, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I just want to go over the various theories. Substance dualism. Substance dualism comes from Descartes. You already have dualism within Plato. Dualism 2. Two worlds. A world of matter that's not real, it's illusory, according to Plato. And the world of immaterial forms, or souls or minds. That's a dualism. But it's not a substance, because remember, Plato, it's not substance dualism according to Plato's theory, because substance, real things for Plato are forms. So he's not going to say this stuff is substance. It's not real. It's illusory. It's a shadow from the substance of forms. Descartes is a substance dualist. He carves the world up into two things, and only two things. Immaterial substances, things, and material things. And a physical body can be, it doesn't have to be your physical body. This is a physical body. This is a physical body. So according to René Descartes, the only types of things or substances that exist in the world are immaterial substances like minds, souls, and then physical substances. If you subscribe to that, and he believes mind or soul, that's who you are. So according to Descartes, you are not your body. And the way that he arrives at that conclusion is kind of through a type of modal logic, where you can figure out what something essentially is by seeing what properties can you subtract that won't destroy it or change it into a different substance, versus those that if I took away these properties, I would either be changing the conversation or literally destroy the... So think about a triangle. And all the things that you could change, the properties of the triangle that you could change, and it's still a triangle. Blue, size, the lengths, isosceles versus right angle. I could change all that, it's still a triangle. What I can't change, can I conceive of a triangle existing as a two-sided figure? So you now know what the essential properties, what a triangle essentially is, a three-sided geometrical figure. Now do the same thing with a human being. If you cut your hands off, I'm going to be responsible for your terrible actions. Would you cease being a human being? You change your hair color, your eye color. And Descartes conceives of, and he's trying to figure out what he could know under the worst circumstances. And he says, you know what? This is where you get the movie The Matrix from. Okay. He's not saying that this is the case, but he's saying this would be the worst case scenario where I'm deceived about everything. If I could find something that even under the worst circumstances, I'm being deceived by it, but I can know this one thing, then I know that one thing pretty well. It's a pretty solid foundation to build the rest of my knowledge. So he says, what if there was an evil demon so powerful that they could make you think that all of this stuff's real? Or that you're awake, but you're actually dreaming? What could you know for certain? Could you know mathematics? He says, no, because I'm sure you've had dreams where you think you're doing mathematics and it's just gobbledygook. So that doesn't really work. And if you had dreams where you think that you're awake and then you realize you're dreaming. He says, could it be possible that an evil scientist or a demon or a robot or whatever, the Matrix, is implanting ideas into you? You have no body, but this is your digital representation of yourself from your own mind, or the input, the program. So you think you're walking around with a body and all this stuff is real, you feel pain, all this stuff, but you don't have a body. So that's possible. So what could I know under circumstances that would be that extreme? The demon seems like he could deceive me in almost everything, because except for one thing. Could the demon deceive me to think that I exist when I don't? This is where it gets back to where people think philosophers are running around doubting they exist. I don't exist, okay? No philosopher thinks that. It's going back to Descartes. And he's not doubting his own existence because he believes he doesn't exist. He's trying to prove that no matter how bad the circumstances, who's asking the question? Who's doubting they exist? The table? The person asking the question. So there has to be a subject to which the doubt or the question or the assertion, I don't exist. Who asked that? Who said that? I did. Okay, there you are. You've already asserted your existence. I, who exist, and doubting that I exist is a contradiction. So you can't, even a demon, an all-powerful demon, could not get you, anytime that you're thinking, to think that you don't exist when you in fact do. Because any time that you doubt, I think there must be a subject that that's attributed to. Now he says, what am I? That's a different question. But cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. Anytime that I'm thinking, I know I exist. Could I exist without a body? I've just thought about it and I didn't contradict myself. It's like I could think about a triangle without being blue, or a particular size. Although you may not ever find a physical one in the world, the very fact that you can modally and conceptually think through, yeah, but could I theoretically think of a triangle in which it's a scenario where it's not an isosceles, or it's not blue? Yes. Okay, but could I ever think of a triangle that's both a triangle and a two-sided geometric figure? No, that's a contradiction. So I know from doing modal logic that therefore what is a triangle? The three-sided geometric figure. What is a person, a human being? What are you? You're not a body, because I was able to theoretically think about you existing under a kind of a sci-fi example of an evil demon or the Matrix in which you exist without a body. But you still exist anytime that you're thinking, so what are you? You are a thinking, res cogitans in Latin, a thinking thing. Bodies, physical, are res extensa. All physical things are extended things. Describe something material, extended to space and time. Minds don't think that to be that way. So That is substance dualism. So you're attached to a body. You're not your body. You're a thinking soul. Kind of reminiscent of Plato. Right? That's why Socrates is not afraid to go to his death. He doesn't associate with his body. The only difference is Descartes thinks physical things are actually substances, and so are minds. You're just minds attached to. And this is where you get Gilbert Ryle's Descartes myth that you read, in which he calls Descartes' theory the ghost in the machine. Because if you are an immaterial soul, a thinking thing, you're like a ghosty substance, immaterial substance that's connected to the machine. Full collision. Right? This is not me. I'm not my body. I'm operating it. Right? That's. You subscribe to that, then you are along the lines with J.P. Moreland. You guys know J.P. Moreland? You ever heard of him? J.P. Morgan, Chase. No, different. He teaches at Bible. Did at least until. Did you never met J.P. Morgan? And Richard Swinburne, famous Oxford professor who I delivered a paper with in Romania and got to go out to events and dinners and stuff like that. Big dogs, right? Big boys. Also, I know J.P. Moreland. I have a lecture recorded too from dialogue. Here's another theory: panpsychism. Psyche in Greek, mind. Pan. So, mind is everywhere. Consciousness. But it gets collected in aggregates and more entities and less in others. And when you get more of something, you see more of the properties of it. So the idea is, who has the most psyche collected? Human beings. That's why it's very obvious to see that human beings have consciousness and a mental life. But the idea is that the mental is spread out through the entire universe, just in different degrees. Next would be animals. It's harder to tell in plants because there's less of it. They think mind is shot, all of nature is shot through with mind. And then inanimate, and so on. And the farther you go down, the less you can see of this. David Chalmers is one. Also, the physicist Roger Penrose is also a panpsychic, who describes panpsychism. And he has a whole theory about microtubules, and the collapse of the wave function is what produces the quantum level. Way down here, consciousness. And the more microtubules that you have collected, the larger consciousness gets. He's a panpsychist. Okay. Then you have people like Colin McGinn, who's called a Mysterian. Now, do you know all the different wavelengths? And your eyes can only pick up so much on that spectrum, the visible spectrum. That's because your sense organs are not designed to be able to pick up on all of reality. It's limited. That's why you have to build instruments to help improve and pick up on things that your own instruments can't. Same with sound waves. You get below a certain frequency, a decibel, that wave, you can't pick it up. But they're out there. Microwave, can't pick that up. So what Colin McGinn thinks is that why hasn't, in the philosophy of mind, how come we haven't been able to create a science of consciousness? Nobody's pulled it off yet. We can't reduce it to physics and make a science out of it. Well, he thinks that perhaps it's the way that we are built, our sense organs. We just don't have the capacities to introspect. Not that consciousness doesn't exist, or there wouldn't be things to learn about it if we could, but just like wavelengths that you can't pick up on because the way your sense organs are constructed, perhaps your mind and brain is constructed in a way that's limited, and that's one of the things it does not have access to or introspection into. So it's a mystery. You can't make a science out of it. If you like that theory, you're along with Colin again, and you subscribe to Mysterianism. Functionalism. That is Gilbert Ryle's Descartes' myth. That functionalism is going to come out of behaviorism. Behaviorism into methodological behaviorism, into logical behaviorism, into functionalism, from functionalism, black box functionalism, and then weak AI, and then strong AI. That's the history of progress of thought that's led to AI. Functionalism is going to basically say, what is the mind? Is it a substance? No. Is it immaterial? No. A functionalist is a materialist. But they're not reductive, and they're not emergentists either. They're not panpsychics. They're not substance dualists. What is mind? It's the way that all the brain parts and neurons function together. They all have certain roles. And when those roles are carried out, like a program, sort of like software. Software has to be run in hardware, like a brain. So what is mind? They're not going to say it's the brain, but they're not going to say it's something immaterial. They're going to say it's a program, it's a set of rules that have to be implemented in some type of hardware. Does it matter that it's organic brain matter, gray matter? For a functionalist? No, if you figure out the program, the rules, the functions, you can implement that in anything that could sustain it. Silicon chips. So now do you see why AI is going to come out of functionalism? You can figure out what the mind is, i.e. a program, the rules, then you can implement that into. That's why also in AI, they're pushing for transhumanism. Upload yourself into the cloud, damn it. You don't need your body. You don't need a brain. Why? As long as you have the program, and the program can be run in some sort of hardware, that is you. That is your mind. That's only true if this is true, and AI is true. Otherwise, you're going to be killing yourself, right? Nice magic trick, right? Identity theorists. David Armstrong, also anomalous monism, Donald Davidson. They are going to say, they're not going to say the mind and consciousness is really an illusion that needs to just be reduced, because all there is brain. Instead, they're going to establish a strict identity. Now, the reason why this comes up and a potential problem for identity theorists, so they're just going to say your mind is your brain, and your brain is your mind. The first objection that's going to come is Leibniz's principle of the indiscernibility of identicals. Can you repeat that? What that means is you're trying to figure out if two things are identical. I'm going to make an identity statement. A is identical to A. If and only if there is no difference between A on the left and A on the right. So, indiscernibility. Can you discern any difference between A and A? If you cannot find something by which they differ, guess what? They're identical. And what happens if conversely, you're able to discern some properties that one has that the other doesn't? Are they identical? That's the principle of indiscernibility of identicals. So this was mounted as a criticism against identity theorists. Yeah, but the mind has things that the brain doesn't. When the brain works, certain regions are activated and stuff like that. But when you think of triangle, do brain surgery, you're never going to find a triangle. Weigh your brain. It will weigh something. Try to weigh the thought of a triangle. But if they have different properties. If they have different properties, then by virtue of Leibniz's principle of the indiscernibility of identicals, therefore mind does not equal brain. You know what the response back is?
Excuse me. Phosphorus is phosphorus.
What does that mean? Okay, those are the ancient names given to the stars, in particular the morning and evening star. In antiquity, they were identified as different stars. Why? The morning star is not the evening star. How do you know that? Principle of indiscernibility of identicals. They're at different positions. One comes out in the morning and one comes out in the evening in different places in the sky. One's brighter, one's... Guess what we found out? The morning star is the evening star. Hesperus is phosphorus. It's Venus is the morning star and the evening star. So that's a refutation of not every time, just because you think that you have a different description, that the two things are different. Why? Because you have a different description of the morning star than you do the evening star. But they're the same thing. So they pick up on this and use that example. They're the same things. You just have different ways of describing the same thing, just like Hesperus and phosphorus. Water is H2O. I can describe it in terms of its high-level properties. I give a high-level description of, well, it's a liquid, it has viscosity, it flows, and you get it below 30 degrees, 32 degrees Fahrenheit, and it will become solid. Very different descriptions than describing the bond angles, the electrons. Is that because, well, H2O is different than water? Didn't you know? No, they're the same thing. H2O is water. But how can you give two different descriptions of it? The principle of indiscernible identicals. Well, because you can describe things in different ways. High-level descriptions, like the mind. You have these mental thoughts and this mental like consciousness and stuff like that. Or you can go down at the bottom, physics, and describe things at low level. It doesn't mean the two are different. It means you're giving different descriptions. One at the low level, microphysics, and one at the macro level. That's the response. That is identity theory. Now, really what you might notice, and again, let's finish up the last one. You might be a physicalist or materialist that says, I don't believe in immaterial things, just physical matter. Oh, then you're a reductive physicalist. No, I'm not. Oh, then you're a functionalist. No, I don't have to be a functionalist either. You could be a non-reductive physicalist. I can't reduce this stuff in principle to, but that doesn't mean that I have to subscribe to immaterial things. Nancy Murphy, and in fact David Chalmers, is one of those as well. But you have this back and forth debate in philosophy of mind between varieties of dualism, whether that's property dualism or substance dualism. So for example, here you might be called a property dualist. Why? Because I believe there's different types of properties. Low-level properties and high-level properties. So you believe in two types of substances. They'll say, no, I don't. I only believe in one type of substance. I might be a materialist. But I believe in two different types of property. Then you're a property dualist. It's still a form of dualism. But if you're like, no, I actually believe, like Descartes, there are two different types of substances or things in the world. Minds, immaterial minds, souls, and physical material stuff. That's another type of dualism. Either way, what you seem to get is a back and forth debate between materialism on all the varieties and dualism, and all the varieties of dualism. And surprise, surprise, in the philosophy of mind, the mind-body problem has not been solved. As soon as one gets an upper hand and wins the argument, it just takes a matter of time before the other one comes up with a more clever theory, refutes that, and then takes more time to come back, and so it never gets solved. You just get rid of bad. Okay, that theory didn't work. Now, in my PhD, I thought this was, in fact, a false dichotomy. What's a false dichotomy? It's an error in thinking and logic where, for example, there's only two pens for you to choose between, green and blue. That's a false dichotomy because you're like, you've got an orange and red pen in your bag, dummy. It's like, refute it, no. These are the only presented options? Well, remember, Aristotle's hylomorphism is not dualism, and it's certainly not materialism. So there's a third way. And I presented, in fact, if you updated that Aristotelian theory in terms of modern science, it could possibly, not that everything that Aristotle says is correct, but if you updated and took certain insights out of Aristotle, perhaps that could offer a potential solution to the mind-body problem. Because you guys aren't solving it. Dualists and materialists don't seem to. Maybe there's a third way. Questions about that so far? So those are kind of the... Nobody ever really considers Aristotle or hylomorphism within contemporary philosophy because they're moderns and they've rejected in ancient antiquity. So as far as back as anybody's willing to go is probably Descartes and substance dualism.
So why did they go back and study that then? isn't it just the basis of the building blocks of the study of? I mean, these were the first persons, and there had to be a reason why we're studying them.
Oh, I find a lot of modern philosophers don't know much about or have not studied ancient philosophy to their own detriment. I think that when you study the whole history of conversation in philosophy, you get a greater insight. It's like a dominoes.
Yeah.
That one idea triggers another idea. I'm triggered. I'm offended by your anti-PC talk on me. And so I'm going to come up with a theory to refute that. Okay, and then the next person. So it's a series of conversation of trying to adjust and correct. Remember what the pre-Socratics even do. I don't understand how you could plop in the middle of a conversation or at the end and be like, ha ha ha, that's so funny. It's like, dude, my mom just died. What are you talking about? Like, oh, they weren't there for the previous conversation. No wonder they missed out. I kind of feel something similar with the way moderns do philosophy. You're entering halfway or at the very end of a conversation and then think you know it all. You don't even know how your position got here historically. So that's why I like to take a historical approach to philosophy. You can see where these ideas come from. Not only that, but contemporary problems in our society today. I can trace them all the way back to certain philosophers, just like a domino. Like this set off this idea, which set off this, which set off this. This happened in history, and then this happened. So you can trace that, and it gives you greater insight to what's it they always say about history?
Repeating itself?
Yeah. The Pete and repeat were brothers. I already told you that one, but I'll do it again. No, I'll do it. And Pete fell off the boat. Who's left? Repeat. And you do it again and again. Yeah, so this is something, again, that's happened within the modern, very recently with modern education. Remember I told you, up until recently, even when the Ivy League schools were built, there were not electives. There were not degrees. You studied the classics, classical liberal arts. That's what you got. You got a degree, and that meant different levels of knowledge, a bachelor's, a master's, and then a PhD, which means a doctorate of philosophy. What did philosophy mean? The study of all things. So once you got a PhD, you knew everything as far as categories. You knew everything there is to know. You've got the PhD. Okay. Now, as science progressed, and science is concerned with production, I'm speaking modern contemporary science, in the Industrial Revolution, it's concerned with productivity. Cares less about what you know and only cares about what you know if it can produce and make something. And so one thing is a bunch of people running around with PhDs aren't necessarily industrials producing. And so they got this brilliant idea, you know what we'll do to be most productive? Instead of everybody learning about everything and how all the history works and how that's connected to music and to philosophy, theology, and arts, that's not too productive. We need less chiefs and more Indians, more cogs, more indentured servants to do the work. And it's just not going to be very efficient if everybody's getting PhDs. So what are we going to do? We're going to divide up the labor. Here is where electives and majors come in for the very first time. You will become the engineer, you'll be the medical doctor, the psychologist, you'll be, what do you want to be? Radio broadcaster. You will be the computer programmer. You will be the culinary. We're gonna have to. We need to cook. Who wants to be the theologian? who wants to be a chemist? Okay. Now you can just focus, instead of learning all the different disciplines, you can just focus on learning mathematics and engineering. You'll be the mathematician. So everybody might be proficient in a particular area, but they don't know anything. Well, that kind of produces something really interesting too. You lose power and freedom. And what you're going to have to do is depend on the state to provide that stuff for you. It's just like, that's why I appreciate my grandfather teaching me how to be self-sufficient, do stuff, to work on cars and mechanics, to build, to be able to do things myself, so that, well, first of all, you know how crazy it is? Like, if you can't, there's obviously stuff I can't work on in my car that's too advanced for me, especially when it gets into computers and stuff like that, which isn't mechanics, it's computers. That you have to take your car to somebody that you don't know, who has a reputation generally as a trade as being shysters. And it's like, you take your car in for a flat, and it's like, well, it's your tranny. I can tell you got to get a new tranny. What else? They start throwing in all this. And we noticed that your spark plugs are completely corroded. So we replaced those. And yes, it's come out to about, so you went in for a couple $100, and it's like your bill's $5,000. And it's like, really? How do I know? You don't know, because you don't know how to do that stuff. So you're not free, you're indebted to another person. Just think about this. You know how bad it is when the electricity gets shut off or goes down. You don't realize how dependent upon the state and other people and companies you are. It's like, oh, that's okay, we'll just, okay, we can't do this, but I'll just cook some soup. It's like, oh yeah, the stove doesn't work. Well, I'll just drink cold soup out of a can.
Oh.
Well, the electric can opener doesn't work. Well, I better write somebody. Your internet's down. There's no electricity, right? I can't call. My phone's down, or something like that. My battery, and you're like, my God, I'm completely trapped. I'm gonna die here. Well, a person that's self-sufficient will be like, that's cool. I grew my own garden. I got my goats and my chickens in the backyard. Okay, I've got my fire out on I don't have electricity. I got my generator of solar panels, right? That type of person is not that affected by it. And that's why they call the liberal arts education an education of freedom. Liberal arts. Is it frees you from the tyranny of others in the state, and you know how all this stuff's connected. So that's why I do like a historical approach. I like the classics and stuff like that. But we live in a modern world that doesn't believe in that. There's very few colleges and universities that implement the classic traditional liberal arts program. And so what you get is specialists. Oh, who cares about this? You just need to. Well, this happens in philosophy too. You don't read about everything. You focus on a very narrow area. And so a lot of these people, just like you see with Tyson, Neil, what's his name? Neil deGrasse Tyson. I'm pretty sure he's good at physics. Everything else, he's a complete retard, and it's embarrassing. For us professional academics, it feels like a 7-year-old who's learned a bit of arithmetic and goes into the calculus professor and tries to school him. It's like, and he's got all his 7-year-olds like, oh man, did you hear that? God, it's like, okay, all the friends are just as ignorant as he is, and so Yeah, they think they're winning the debate. What about the specialists, the people who actually know mathematics, that are professors? They're like, God, this isn't, stop, you're embarrassing yourself. I see this online all the time. My wife was debating with somebody online. And it was just so stupid. I might just tell the person to stop, they're embarrassing themselves. That they don't know. Go read up on the literature and come back, and then, but they don't think that. There's cognitive dissonance. They think they're winning the argument. How sad is that? It's like a bunch of children. What do you do with somebody like that? It's like, oh man, slam dunk, I refuted that fool. And it's like, you just were talking about marshmallows, dude, and s'mores. Like, what do you mean you refuted my deductive syllogism? You're talking about candy and marshmallows. Yeah, that's right, I refuted you. It's like, at that point, you just have to tell somebody, stop talking to them. Like it's a waste of energy. You're just going to make yourself upset. Right? You can't let them embarrass. Now, it's even more unfortunate when all of society becomes just as ignorant. They're like, oh man, that guy's got a really good point. It's like, what do you do as somebody who actually knows the literature, and you're like, oh my God, education has failed these people. Or these people have failed to the education. So that's the way I feel with, okay, Neil, stick to what you're good at. Don't get a big head and be like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go into philosophy and theology and make all these big claims that I know nothing. I haven't read any of that stuff. Likewise, a lot of these people, they know their areas very, very well. So you ask them about ancient philosophy, antiquity, they don't know what they're talking about. So it's a common kind of modern contemporary problem that we have to deal with. Too bad now. But yeah, great question. Other questions? Do you want to hear a joke? Why tell the joke when I can show it on YouTube? You like The Simpsons? This is before your time, but The Simpsons came out on the Tracy Ullman show. That's when I first. And the drawings were very, very primitive, so it's going to look a lot different. But one of the writers, Simpsons, he studied philosophy. And sometimes it shows. Simpsons, see how good The Simpsons would look back then? Yeah, animation's pretty sick, bro.
Dad, what is the mind? Is it just a system of impulses, or is it something tangible?
Relax. What is mind? No matter. What is matter? Never mind.
Thanks, Dad.
Good night, son.
Okay, do you get? So, you're a substance dualist. He's asking, what is the mind, Dad? Is it just a series of impulses from a physical machine, a brain? What does he say? What is mind? No matter. Okay. Well, what is matter? Never mind. Okay. I asked my thesis advisor, should I start off my my thesis presentation defense with this Simpsons joke? He's all, you better not. That might set a bad tone. they probably wouldn't be laughing just like you and I. They're just like, what the frick? Hi, I'm Troy. You might have seen me in my films. Remember this guy?
So what happened to Tracy Ullman?
Yeah, what did happen to...
He had a great show when he went.
Any theories? She was sacrificed
Drugs.
by Hollywood elites. She was killed by the CIA. She, I don't know what the heck happened to her. Okay. There's people I think about that all the time. Like, they just dropped off the face of the earth.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question since
Yeah.
we're on the mind? How does, even from an animal to a human being, how do we know the suckle? How do we know the basic emotions? Where is that programmed? Is that programmed in our genes, in our being, or is...
So remember, animals operate purely by instinct. So they may have levels of intelligence, but they don't have rational deliberation, morals, and stuff like that.
Yeah, but even human beings, when we're born, we know to get milk and to suck on.
So human beings are rational animals. That means we have instincts. But we have rationality as well. So we can deliberate, make arguments, introspect, do various things to correct our instinct. We have the freedom too. If you're operating solely on instinct, and you see, like one of my cats has like a really high prey drive.
Oh, high what?
Prey drive.
How's that? Kill.
Then something moves, it's like, and it's just like, especially lizards. I see my cat wait 3 weeks next to this vent because a lizard went in there. And I'm like, man, that's one high prey drive. What a patient little bugger, right? Just like, I'm going to get him. I'm going to. So they don't have the free, it override. In fact, I had another incident with my, just like, you know where you rub a dog on that and it's all, right? It's like total instinct. My cats do that too. So I was doing my cat's like, and it starts like doing the, yeah, it's triggered that neural connection that tells its instinct to kick. That's the spot, right? And its body just starts. It doesn't have control what it's doing. It's not like a deliberated, like, oh, you know what? Master's scratching my spot. I think I will too. Oh, right? It doesn't do that, right? It triggers an instinct. It doesn't have the freedom to. You have instinct, but then you have a rationality to deliberate. Oh, is that good for me to do that? Like I see somebody running, and I'm like, oh, get it, oh, right? And then I'm like, oh, that's murder. That's right. I can't do that. I have to correct myself, right? And I have the freedom to do so. So yeah, I think the certain stuff like the suckle to your body to seek out and do certain things to preserve itself under certain circumstances, that's built into your biology. It's instinct, and but you just have a mind as well that you can correct those or deliberate about it. Yeah, I think you're right. Because it's not learned. There's a lot of stuff that's just not learned behavior that seems to be passed down through genetics.
How does a heart beat? I mean, you can take it out of the body and it still beats. How does it do? I mean, something has to be there telling it to do it. I don't know. Just weird questions. Sorry.
What do you guys think? How do hearts beat? How do eyes see? I mean, every one of those previous is going to give a different answer to. Aristotle would say that it's soul. What is soul? It's the body living. So when it's sometimes it seems very close to functionalism, but it's not. Because functionalism doesn't believe in immaterial stuff. Aristotle believed form or soul is immaterial. That it's just not separate from the body. Just like sight is an immaterial power, but it's not separate from the physical eye. Well, what is it? Well, when the physical eye is living and working with all its parts correctly, when it's ensouled, when it has life, when it has the form of the eye, then it sees, it lives. So soul is life, it's living. So they would say that too, that as each organ has a plan within the whole form or DNA of the soul of that basically activates. When does it start? When the parents who have their DNA instruction set comes together in conception, and it turns on the switch. And now, boom, 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 right? And things start moving together and living. That would be an Aristotelian response to. If you're a materialist, you're just going to have to go back in the chain of causation. This atom caused this atom, which caused this atom, which caused that atom. Which really makes the question of, well, how do you get life from inanimate, non-living things? They seem to be fundamentally different. Is it magic?
Yeah.
Does it just pop, just get enough of it together and whew? It's the same issue that's going on with philosophy of mind. How do you get a physical system to produce things that aren't physical, like consciousness and stuff like that? Is it magic? I don't think they're going to want to say that, because that doesn't sound very scientific or philosophical. Yeah, it's just spooky. Then philosophers and scientists don't like spooky stuff. Here are common terms associated in philosophy of mind. Properties, you've already seen that. Events. Cause produces an event, an effect. So if you're a physicalist, it's my neurons, these causing these things to go off, and then I get an idea, and the idea is to lift up my hand like that. So neuronal C fibers firing produces the phenomenon of pain in my hand or something like that. That's an event. It's produced by physical processes. So you will see processes. Qualia. It's a fancy term for the noun of qualitative. The things that you're qualitatively aware of. What are they? Qualia. What blue is like to you? What dark roast coffee tastes like to you? It may taste different to other people. It's the same thing, but you're having a qualitative experience that's subjective, that's called qualia. Also, we have propositional states. Which is different than phenomenal consciousness. That's why we have mental events versus phenomenal events. Let's be like a mental event. So clearly there's a difference between what it feels like to stab a hot knife into my hand, right, or my eye. Like, oh, man, that's really interesting. Oh! Let me report this to you, what this actually, this qualitative experience feels like to me. It hurts like hell, but I can't see anything anymore. Okay, that's a phenomenal event within your consciousness. But you have other mental events. Beliefs. Denver is the capital of Colorado. That occurs in your mind, the mental event. But it's not a qualitative experience. It's like, oh man, this belief feels so nice. Denver's the capital of Colorado. Kind of has an interesting texture to it. Tastes a bit funky. Smells really weird. No, there's no what it's like. It's still a mental event. It's a mental event that's in a state of your mind that's in the form of a proposition. Or maybe a desire. I want to go to Denver. I have a desire to. Those would be called mental events that are propositional states. So you can have phenomenal or conscious states. That's what it's like to experience something, and then you can have propositional states. Intentionality. Everybody gets this one confused. It doesn't mean that you have an intention or desire. It means aboutness. Things that are about other things. Or directedness. And it only seems to apply to mental states. For example, the proposition or mental state or belief, Denver is the capital of Colorado, is not about a brain state, is it? It's not a brain state, or just a brain state. It's about something. It's making a claim about somewhere, and that somewhere having a capital. Now, what's interesting, so it's directed and it's about something. But physical things don't have this property of intentionality. Not intrinsically. What is this desk about? What is it directed towards? What is a tree about? It's like, that's just a weird category here. What are you talking about? Physical things don't have intentionality. They're not making statements about things or having properties directed and pointing out things in reality. Minds do that sort of stuff. So that's what intentionality is. Propositions or beliefs or words that are about something, that are directed at spring is beautiful in springtime. That is pointing out. And what's really interesting seems to be occurring in the brain, but it's directed at another place in the world and at a different time. And isn't it interesting? It seems to hit it. It's not like when I think Paris is beautiful in springtime, it's like, whoops, Australia. It's like, damn. That's it. How does this physical system do that? Not only is it about things, it hits the thing that it's about. That's not even located anywhere near it or even in the same time or place. That's weird. Supervenience is a certain logical relation between low-level properties and high-level properties. Epiphenomenalism, I'll talk about that a little bit. Causal overdetermination. Maybe I should just talk about that right now, but we already talked about low-level properties. This just gets a fancy, simple term in philosophy. Low-level properties, the level of microphysics, are called A properties. High-level properties, like I'm feeling pain, oh, I'm hungry, I have a desire to, those are B-level, high-level properties. It's kind of like a glossary of terms in downward causation. Okay, let's talk about causal overdetermination. We've already talked a little bit about Occam's razor. Who remembers Occam's razor? William of Occam. Remember, the bastardized version was the simplest explanation is the correct one. But that's not really the best way to put it, because you can think of scenarios where the best explanation isn't the simplest. The simplest explanation is the dumb explanation. What it's saying, Occam's razor, is that we always like to use the 8-ball is the event. And every event has a cause by principle of sufficient reasoning. Principle of sufficient reason. If that cause is enough to explain the event, don't add more causes. Don't be like, well, yeah, but there's another one and another, and this adds up to. From that, the way that physics works, the science of physics, is the entire physical universe is causally closed. The system's closed. That means for any event, any physical event, we'll call that piece of E. A physical event, since every event has a cause, has a physical cause. And nothing outside the physical system can act on it. Why? Because this was already sufficiently determined. So this is the physical. You can't be like, well, yeah, but there's an angel also pushing that. Why? Because too many causes is causal overdetermination. So it's sort of like this. Imagine you're a coroner. You want to be a coroner? We didn't get one of the when we're handing out degrees just earlier. And who wants to be the coroner? Who likes looking at dead bodies? Huh? Thank God that you don't like looking at dead bodies. But suppose you did. Suppose you're a coroner. And you get this report, dead on arrival. And you've got to, as a coroner, determine the cause of death. Put it in the report. So you look through the police report, and it says here something really interesting. This man was shot in the head. Okay, that's enough to kill you. Certainly. His brains are blown out all over. Nothing left, okay? He died from a gunshot. But here's another interesting fact. At the exact same time, he was struck by lightning.
What a way to go.
Okay, now you fill in the blank. Cause of death. Yeah. What if you put, well, the gunshot to the head and the lightning bolt? It's like, well, there's too many causes there. Enough was the gunshot was enough to explain how he died. So why are you saying the lightning bolt? And vice versa, a lightning bolt is. That is kind of a funny example of how we would see causal overdetermination. You can't put them both down because it's causally. One is enough to explain. Now, what makes it tricky is they happen at the same time. Now, how does this relate to philosophy of mind? Everything physical that happens, that you do physically, has a physical explanation. Look at this. I sit on the pin. Now at the low-level phenomena start describing what happens. If I sit on a pin, my nerves will relay a message to my brain and produce a brain event. What does the brain event do? It sends another message, to my body to release lactic acid and then constrict. all of which has the cumulative effect of going, ah, and getting up, leaping forward. Sitting on the pin also causes not only the brain event, but a mental event. Feeling pain. Oh my God, this hurts. This feels really bad. The sitting on the pin at the level of physics produces the brain event. The brain event produces a leap forward, but the brain event also produces a mental thought. Don't sit on that anymore. Leap forward. Here is the problem. You have a physical state that produces, or at least the brain state. You have a brain state, just firings, neuronal firings, that produces the message to muscle contraction. The neuronal state also produces the phenomenal mental experience of pain. What it's like to. The muscle contraction not only produces you getting up, but also the wincing, right? What we have here is, let's say this also produces thought. Get up, you dummy. And you think that your mind tells your body to get up and move. What's the problem? Causal overdetermination. Whatever your body's doing, and whether it's, hey, I'm thirsty, I have this mental thought, and then don't you think that your mind tells your body what to do? I need to come to class today. I need to open the door and walk into class. And your mind's telling your body to, or reach down and grab that and take a drink. The problem is, philosophy of mind, all of that can be explained in terms of microphysics. Every physical thing that you do can be explained by physical causes. What room is there left for mental life? In other words, this is where epiphenomenalism comes. Epiphenomenalism is going to state, because the physical, in physics, the system is causally closed. So every physical event has a physical cause. And don't violate Occam's razor and multiply causes beyond what's necessary to explain that. Your thought and desire to leap forward does not cause you to leap forward. It's the logical consequence of it. And here is something you might hear often. Correlation does not mean causation. If you see the professor walks in when the second hand hits 2, there is a correlation. But would any of you think, my God, that's really interesting. Every time that pushing to 2 causes the professor to walk in. I'm like, oh, whoa. Ugh. And you just keep messing with getting me to like come into. No, you'd realize that, and this happens even in science too. What was it with was it the polio outbreaks too, that they noticed that it was like a hot summer and the kids were eating a lot of ice cream?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And they were like, my God, dairy and ice cream are causing polio. Correlation does not mean cause. People make this mistake all the time. If the physical system is causally closed, nothing can act outside in on it. Why? Because everything's explainable in terms of physics at the physical level. Then what that means is that your mental thoughts that you think are telling your body to move are just correlated. Right? Your brain event at the physics level produces the thought or desire to leap forward. But the stuff, this is epiphenomenal. Mental stuff is epiphenomenal, meaning it's sort of like the suds on a wave. It doesn't do anything. It's produced from the bottom, or if you like cappuccinos, it's the nice cappuccino froth on the top. But it's causally inert. It doesn't act on. It's just correlated with the. That is epiphenomenalism. That is one way that theorists have tried to get out of the problem of causal overdeterminate. Wait, we can explain everything that you physically do in terms of physical antecedent events. What room is there for the mental? Nothing. It's produced by the mental, but there is no downward causation. Your thought to pick up the glass or your thought or desire to leap forward does not produce anything. It's just produced by the bottom up. Everything's bottom up. That is epiphenomenalism. Questions about this stuff's hard, isn't it? I don't know if I want to get supervenience is kind of difficult. Yeah, don't you understand this? B properties supervene on 8 properties if no two possible situations are identical with respect to the A properties while differing with the B properties. Don't you get that? Why don't you understand what I'm saying? Because it's difficult. For example, so supervenience is a way to get out of the causal problem. Show, well, how are high-level properties like mental properties, or like in chemistry and physics, how is high-level property of solidity or liquidity related to the low-level descriptions of bond angles? Okay, we have two different, well, for example, biological properties, or if you want to go with liquidity or something, not quite level, but biology, they're said to supervene on low-level physical properties insofar as you have two possible situations that are physically identical. So, for example, if you have a brain state going, we do an MRI, and it's like, it's lighting up in this, and then you are. So at the low level, you're physically identical. The brains are biologically identical. It's simply saying that you will get no high-level changes unless you change something down at the bottom. But notice, it doesn't mean that bottom is causing stuff going up. It just means if you're going to change your belief that Denver is the capital of Colorado to the high-level phenomenon, the B property, according to supervenience, that cannot occur unless there's an underlying change. So if you did an MRI, if you were like, I don't buy it. I don't think Denver's I think it's Vail, Colorado is the capital. Supervenience would say, do an MRI and you'll see that something changed although the change doesn't produce the, okay, so it's just giving a certain logical, we don't need to get into that, it's just a theory that's out there, that it gets into a lot of modal logic that, okay, so remember, There's two types. Consciousness is a psychological property, and there's two types of psychological properties. Psychological consciousness, you're feeling a pain, what it's like for you to drink an espresso or a latte, and a phenomenal consciousness. So phenomenal consciousness, remember, is qualitative awareness, what it's like. Psychological are reportability. Report to me what you're thinking. Thinking that Denver is the capital of Colorado. Introspection is a psychological consciousness. Introspective accessibility of information. So it's just laying out different types of brain states within consciousness. All of this you're aware of. Okay. Questions on that before I get into behaviorism? I'm trying to think where I should go first. It's a bad chair. How many people have taken psychology? So you've heard of behaviorism, haven't you?
Yeah.
Who's the famous behaviorist? No, he's definitely not. What is this called? B.F. Skinner. B.S. Skinner. No, it's B.F. Best friend. For life, Skinner. Pavlov. So behaviorism is a materialistic theory. Nothing exists in the world other than matter. So here we have a question going back. Before I get into, let me just backtrack real quick. Part of this whole problem with epiphenomenalism and supervenience that it doesn't seem that you can have downward causation. This is causally. This also ties into something else. And we got into this in logic class today. We were talking about identifying different fallacies and stuff like that. And I'm sure that all of you have heard the one where somebody gives an example and the person's like, that's not the same. Which is interesting because what do we call the literary device where you compare two things that are unlike and find something that they're similar by? Called analogy. Does nobody learn what analogies are in school? I hear this all the time. That's not the same. Of course, that's what analogy is. Two things that are not the same that share something similar. In order to compare two things, or in order for two things to relate that are different, they must have something common between them. If there is nothing similar between A and B, which are clearly different, I cannot compare them. Do you know what analogies come from mathematics, actually? I can compare A to B if A is to C as C is to B. This is called the mean proportion. It's an actual formula. You can figure out, I do this formula figuring out your grades.
Another thing
This is to this as your score is to 100 points. Surprise, surprise. X equals 5. Right? You got 5% in class. What happened? Okay, so yes, you compare apples to oranges. Not the same. You can't do that. I can when I basically say, what is it they share in common? They're both fruit. And the idea that we do that in argumentation is because when you find what's common, you have a rule or principle that applies to two different cases. Of course, things aren't the same. But this is how you trap somebody and win an argument. Is that, for example, do you believe you should have the right to do whatever you want? Everybody has the rights to do whatever they want. Okay, derive that principle. Everybody has, what's the rule? The right to do whatever they want. Okay, speaking about rights to do whatever you want, apply that to another case. Can I punch you in your Adam's apple? Oh, no, you can't do that. Oh. So you're not a man of principle. Refuted. Oh. Okay, you've trapped them in inconsistency. And inconsistency by definition is false. So that's why we use analogies in argumentation. But notice, somebody can misapply that. If the two don't have anything in common, you could say that's a bad analogy. There's nothing relatable there that you can pull out. There's no principle to be derived to be applied to the other thing. Okay, so that does happen. Okay, think about this. Here is a physical object that's different than this. This has a certain mass and velocity and directionality. Okay? Force. Mass over. If F equals ma, yeah, force equals mass times acceleration. Mass and the acceleration is going to give a gift. A gift that just keeps on giving. Okay. How does it do it? Well, it has to have a transfer of something that's like something else physical. So this is transferred to, just like with Aristotle too. How do you get immaterial forms that are encoded in matter, that are forming the matter, into your mind as an immaterial idea form? Well, you need physical sense organs that can come and touch. Do you see the commonality? Form is to matter. Matter is to form. The body, the sense organs. Those are the common things so that this is transferred through. Like knows like. Here is one of the mind-body problems. Let's list the properties of the mental and the physical. Mental phenomena is subjective. Okay. Your belief that Denver is the capital of Colorado, does that exist on the table or on your shoe? Oh my God, I just stepped in Denver equals Colorado. No, it exists in subjects. Your experience, your phenomenal experience of what it's like to drink a frothy cappuccino, where does that experience, that awareness exist? It's not in the cappuccino. It's in you. How many people don't like cappuccinos? Is that because it magically transforms its chemical composition when it touches your mouth? No. It means you respond qualitatively different to. That's why mental life is subjective. What about physical things? They're objective. subjective things are put into first-person point of view, first-person language. Objective things are put into third-person point of view. That if something's physical, unlike my experience of blue or the taste of a cappuccino, you have no access to that. It's within me, the subject. You can speculate and be like, I hope it's kind of like what I have. But notice how different that is than there is a clock at the end of the room. Is that just in me? Can you verify that? All of you verify. Why? Because it's objective. It exists as an object outside of the subject. Your thought of a triangle, or that Denver is the capital of Colorado, or you're feeling a pain, put a number on that. How much does that weigh? Like, you're mixing categories. On physical thing, how much does this weigh? How long is it? That's a number, it's quantitative. But mental things tend to be in terms of quality. How much do you believe that that's true? Now, I know we try to, you see this always in the hospital, right? You've got the hot knife stuck in your eye and you've now got to go to the hospital. And the doctor's like, on a scale of 1 to 10. Yeah. Try to describe, they're trying to quantify all of it. Now, that's not really, it doesn't really work, okay? Because you've all seen this happen. He's like, a 2? It looks like it hurts like hell, right? You sure? Yeah, it's a, and then another person's like, I got a boo-boo on my elbow. On a scale of 1 to 10, describe a 9. It's like, really? You can give more or less, sort of like the Moss scale of hardness. There's a way to figure out what stones are harder than others by which one scratches the... Have you ever heard of Moss? It always reminds me of how many people have seen Cheech and Chong Up in Smoke. Do you remember? He's got the pimp comes up and he's like trying to sell, like, he's like, what you need, man? I got the watches, I got these. And he's like, this is a real diamond. Okay? What does he do with the diamond to try to prove that it's actual real diamond? He goes to his pimped out ride, Cheech's, and he's all on the glass. He's like, hey man, take it easy. He's like, well, it's real. Okay, well, harder items will scratch. The glass cannot scratch the diamond, but the diamond can. So you could put that, but that's not quantitative. That's not really putting a number on. So again, with mental thoughts, you can do more or less, but it really kind of absurd to put, like, to number it. It doesn't really work that way. Mental things are intentional. They're about the thought that Denver is the capital of Colorado is directed at a place. It's about something. Physical things are non-intentional. Trees are not about anything. Rocks are not making any claims directed at other things. Mental things are not spatially located. You don't believe me? Think of a triangle and then try to find it in your brain. Where is it? And just because a region's lighting up or activating doesn't mean, again, I like the car analogy. Find 65 miles per hour in your engine. Oh, I got it. Right, it's right there. Why? Because it's smoking, man. Don't you see? It's hot. It's like, it's not the same thing. It's not spatially located. Not extended. How much does the thought of triangle extend through your brain? How much space does it occupy? It doesn't seem to occupy any space. Physical things do. In fact, that's a great way to define what is physical material. Things extended through space. Or at least located, because, I mean, you get down to subatomic particles, it's kind of hard to say, like, well, how much extension through space do they have? Or energy. Well, certainly they're located in space. Everything physically can be explained causally by microphysics. We can reduce high-level properties, for the most part, down to and explain in terms of microphysics. And this acts causally, physics, and is a system of physics. Its causes are closed. We don't need any more causes. It all can be explained within physics. Mental life, not explainable by physics. And as you saw, it can't act on anything physical. Now, notice the list that we have up here. Give me attributes of the mind and give me attributes of the body, physical bodies. They're just the opposite. Name one thing that's in common. How does mind relate to body when there's no common denominator? How can, well, you've seen this like with the movie Ghost or any like Hollywood movies. So the person dies, right? And then it's like this kind of like shadow image comes like, whoa, I guess I'm dead. Oh, I'm so thirsty, man. And like, and you try to like grab the, it's like, why do they do that in Hollywood, right? And you walk through doors and stuff like that. Because it seems like ghosty stuff, or mental, is fundamentally the opposite. And there's nothing common with the. Just like this is common. I can transfer something, force to another object. Why? Because they're physical. But if I have something that's not physical, how does it make contact with? This is why you read Gilbert Ryle's critique of Descartes, because that is one of the critiques of Descartes. First of all, where does the mind even exist in the body? Well, Descartes just finds the one place in the mind that, or the brain that he didn't, that scientifically they have no explanation for what it does. Does anybody know what that might be in the brain? Yeah. The pineal gland. They're like, well, we don't know what this does, so we have a vacancy for an explanation. Throw the mind in there. I guess like your mind and soul sits in there, and it's like, and then your body's like, oh, wow, check me out, I'm moving. Well, Gilbert Ryle's like, that sounds really weird. It's like the ghost in the machine. How does a ghost come in contact with physical things? It doesn't. So we have a mind-body problem. One way to get around that is be like, well, Descartes, that's because you subscribe to spooky and material stuff. So here's one response. I'm a materialist. I don't believe in spooky, immaterial stuff that I can't measure, that's causally inert. Why do we even need that? I'm a materialist. This leads into, this is what behaviorists. You think the mind is your inner life. And your body is your outer life. A behaviorist is basically going to say there really is no inner life. Why? Because if you're a physicalist, a materialist, you don't believe in subjective. Everything's objective. It can be cashed out in objective third-person language, vocabulary. Okay, how does the behaviorist attempt to do this? Well, what are mental thoughts? Mental thoughts are simply behavior. What is behavior? Stimulus response. P cue. So let's suppose you have the belief that it's raining. Is there anything spooky in your brain or your mind, your inner life, that it is to be thought it's raining outside? They'll say no. Everything's physical. So what is it? It's just the tendency or the behavior to carry an umbrella. If it is raining, there's the stimulus. So input, output. If it's raining, I carry an umbrella. I don't need, and this appeared to them to be very scientific, I don't need to do Freudian analysis. All that stuff's bogus. I don't need you to introspect. All I need to know what a thought or belief, it's raining, is simply look, if it's raining, you'll behave in a certain way. You'll have umbrella carrying behavior. So that soon became ridiculous. And tons of philosophy jokes have been made because of that. Like the two lovers. You hear this one? Two lovers consummate their love. They're both behaviorists. Surprise, surprise. And the one lover says to the other, "It was good for you." How was it for me? Right? Rather than saying, "It was good for me." You can't introspect. There's no reportability from your, right? What is it for you to have that experience? Your mental experience? You don't know. Let me report it to you. I'm a behaviorist. It was good for you. Now let's exchange positions, and then you tell me what. Describe my behavior. It was good for you too. Nice, right? It just shows how absurd that. Noam Chomsky, the famous linguist and philosopher, says behaviorism is so absurd. To think that to do psychology is simply to describe behavior is as silly as suggesting you want to study physics, just do meter readings. Right? It's like, no, that's the behavior. Those are things, ways of measuring what's going on in physics. But who thinks in their right mind, like, I'm going to sign up for physics. I'm going to learn how to read my meters, right? It's like, I know everything there is to know about physics now. It's like, that's what behaviorism's like. You think you're doing psychology because you can report people's behavior? Also, might there be other reasons? What if it's raining and you don't carry umbrellas? So, and you believe it's raining. So do you see what the problem is? You can't. A belief isn't simply behavior because we act in ways that are inconsistent with input, output all the time. I'm not holding an umbrella, but I do believe it's raining. What's the behaviorist going to say to that? I don't know. So, this leads into methodological behaviorism. And all of this is supposed to be a critique of Descartes. So methodological behaviorism said that, look, Descartes is just wrong as a matter of fact. There is no inner life, mental life. Everything's physical and simply it's input-output. That came up again with its own problems. And so they updated that. John Watson, B.F. Skinner are methodological behaviorists. That was updated with logical behaviorism. Logical behaviorism simply suggested Descartes' not wrong as a matter of fact, but as a matter of logic. And so they couch everything in terms of logical relations. What are thoughts? If P, then Q's. Why am I bringing this up? Because after logical behaviorism, what does that sound a lot like? Input, output. Yes. Yeah. That's exactly what. But in order, and so this is going to start to prepare the foundations for artificial intelligence theories to come in. First, we need to look at functionalism. Because it's kind of a combination of logical behaviorism with functionalism, or basically functionalism is a response and arises out of logical behavior. So you read Gilbert Ryle's Descartes' Myth. Now, functionalism is going to deny all the other theories, but it's still a physicalist theory. But its direct attack is against substance dualism. There is no such thing as an immaterial mind. But you're not a limited materialist for identity. He's not going to say mind and brain are the same thing. And he's not going to say mind is simply and consciousness is an illusion. It's physics and your brain system just making a trick, the glitch. He's not going to say that. His theory is a bit more sophisticated. So he's going to say, it makes perfect sense to say, I have a mind. I have a brain, a body. So let's just break down the grammar of, you have a subject, a verb, and predicate. But as soon as you attach the predicate to the verb, it modifies the way in which you have something. For example, I have a headache. The way I have a headache is very different than the way I have a $100 bill. $100 bill. $100 bill. I'm just going to keep pointing that up until you guys kill me. But true though, right? The way you have a headache, just because you have the same words, I have, doesn't mean you're having in the same way. I have a headache very differently than the... So he says, when you put these two together, so both these are valid logically. It makes sense. Because the way you have a mind is different than the way you have a brain. But when you say I have a mind and brain, you've committed a category error, a logical error. And the example he uses, does anybody remember from the book? She came home in. To illustrate. She... All right, there's many different ways a person can come home in. He says, does it make any sense to say she came home in a flood of tears? Do you know what a sedan chair is? Carry the princess on the sedan. You know where you have like slaves carrying the poster. That's a sedan chair. She came home in a flood of tears and a sedan chair is the example he uses. Does that make any sense to you? Like, I know what it means to come home in a flood of tears. Period. And I know what it means to come home in a sedan chair. But I'm a bit confused. You're telling me she came home in a flood of tears and a sedan chair, and both the same way. What does that mean? Doesn't mean anything. It's nonsensical. You're mixing your categories. So he's saying, look, it's okay to say you have a mind, because the way you have a mind is very different than the way you have a brain. He illustrates this through the idea of the university or the college. Okay, let's say your parents or a friend wants to see Fullerton College. You're going to give them a tour. First place you start is here, the 1400 building. I want to see Fullerton College. Okay, let's begin with the 1400 building. This is a social science building. And your friend or parent says, so this is Fullerton College, the 1400 building? No. Okay, well, show me the college. I am. Come on. Show them the library, the administration of it. Is that Fullerton College? Then show me Fullerton College. You go around and you show every building, the sports field, and you're done with the tour. Your parent or friend asks you, so where's Fullerton College? I showed you it, but you just told me none of those things were Fullerton College. Where is Fullerton College? But does it even have to be these physical buildings or physical locations? So he's saying, and the analogy is, if you're looking in the brain at all the parts, where's the mind? Is it the frontal cortex, frontal lobe, cerebellum? Is that it? You give a whole tour of the. Remember, he's a physicalist. So he's not going to say mind is anything separate from the brain, but it's not the same thing as any of the physical brain. So he's saying you're looking and asking the question the wrong way, the same way that if somebody's like, is this the college? Is this a... No. Well, what is the college? It's the way that each of these buildings perform the role. This has certain rules and role that it plays within the larger collective. They have a function. And it doesn't even need to be implemented in this building. I've seen the trailers. Okay, it doesn't even, in fact, we don't even need a building. As long as the role can be played out. It's sort of like, let's do chess. What's chess? And you go, okay. And you pull out a chessboard and you pull out the pawn. Is that chess? No. That has a certain role. Function. What's its function? Well, in the larger set of the game, chess, it's a thing can move two spaces at first, forward, and then every other space, one forward, and to kill diagonal. That's the rules that it abides by. Okay. Then you show the queen and the knight, and is that no? That's not. You show all the different stuff, and they're like, okay, I showed you chess. I showed you what each one of these things are. Where's chess? That is it. It's this physical. No, in fact, you don't even need those physical pawns to play chess. We could all stand up and play the different roles. Or we could use rocks or leaves. What's important is the function, the program, the rules of the game. Now, you can't perform a function, a program, or implement rules or a game without matter. But what the matter is pretty irrelevant, right? We just saw it with the buildings and the... So what he's saying is to ask where the mind is in the brain is equivalent to asking where's Fullerton College in the buildings. You're asking the wrong question. It's the role that the buildings play. So we don't need the buildings. No. We need to implement something physical. Same with chess. That is functionalism. The mind, so it's okay to say, I have a mind. What does that mean? I have a program, function. Well, what is the function? It's all the stuff in the brain or the body that fulfills certain functions, plays out a role within the larger What does this sound like? A program? Software. What does the brain and body sound like? How do you implement a program? Where do you implement a program? How do you run a program? On hardware. This became the computational model of the mind. That's all mind is the program. And you have to run programs or software on hardware. But you can change the hardware. According to a functionalist, is it absolutely necessary that the program, the software called the mind, be run on the hardware of organic brain gray matter? As long as it can sustain it. As long as you can play chess with rocks, right? It's going to be a bit hard with water. You're in the ocean, you're like, hey, move the... Okay, that matter is not going to work, okay? So you do have to have matter that can support the... Just like, obviously you can't run certain software without updated hardware. Try running modern programs on some old computers. You don't have your graphics, what do you call it? Yeah, graphics card. You don't have enough memory and power to run that thing. You don't have the hardware to run your software. Well, if you could get the hardware to sustain, it could be silicone chips. So as long as you figure out what the program, the function, the rules of the game are, then theoretically you can produce artificial intelligence. You can make computers. That would answer the hard problem. How can physical systems ever be able to produce consciousness? Functionalism has an answer for that. Okay. So, do you know who Alan Turing is? The Turing machine. Alan Turing was one of the first developers of computers, the counting machine. And the way all computers work is input, rules, what to do with the input, and output. And all the rules can be codified in terms of counting and numbers. And you can simplify that simply by ones and zeros. Computers use electricity to do that. Carry to count and they crunch a lot of input in numbers. The way it does that using electricity is on and off. On, circuit off, circuit on, circuit off, okay? On, off, right? Okay. Is it going to go down? I forgot mine. That's what happens when I rush. Let me finish up real quick. So AI. Alan Turing, who came up with the Turing machine, which is an early prototype of the computer, the Enigma code, there's a whole history behind the... He basically came up with something called the Turing test. Well, it looks like computers are doing intelligent things. They can store information, produce a large output from input. So that's the easy problem. Could they ever become actually intelligent by artificial means? It's artificial. It's not actually organic, grown up. Well, he says, well, what would be intelligent? He said, well, if something, here's the Turing test. If a computer fools you into thinking, if you think it's intelligent, then it is intelligent. So if you are typing on instant messenger to somebody, and you're getting all these responses, and you ask yourself, how do I know this isn't a Russian bot? How do I know this isn't my actual friend or a Russian bot? Is this really an intelligent person or is it a computer? Turing's sense would be that if you were fooled, it's actually intelligent. Artificially intelligent. That's enough to... Okay, what do you guys think about that? What are your general thoughts? Could you actually get... It's one thing to get a computer to act intelligently and to fool you. Do you think a computer could ever become aware? And the next stage would be, could it become aware of itself? But aware of its surroundings. It has a conscious qualitative experience of what it's like. Or actually be artificially intelligent. Would it just look like it? And how could you ever tell?
I think you'd be aware of why.
But would that be like a plant? A plant doesn't have awareness, but it can react to its environment. It might even look like it's aware, but we know it's not. So would a computer be something similar, that it looks like it's acting when it's aware, but it's just responding to its environment and its rules, rule-governed behavior? What's that? Yeah, like a plant. So at the very best, it would become a plant. Okay, what was the other? I'm going to give you two arguments against. Let me shut this off real quick. Now it freezed right on a perfect result. I had you read Frank Jackson's What Mary Doesn't Know, correct? Did you find it weird? Interesting? Did you understand it? Okay, let me start with a question. Suppose you lived 500 years ago. What color is this? Not a trick question.
500 years ago?
Yeah, you're 500 years ago and somebody's like, yeah, what's in this box? What color? Then somebody asks you, define what is red. Remember, to come up with a definition, to define is to put borders. So, if you define a triangle, what borders do is it keeps everything you want to include in the definition, and a good definition will exclude everything that you don't want in there. So, a bad definition for triangle is a shape. Why? Because you just ended up getting circles and squares and rhombuses in there. You don't want that. You're like, okay, what kind of shape? Three-sided. Okay, but now I'm going to get stuff like this. A three-sided geometric figure, angles add up to 180 degrees. Good, excludes everything else. Okay, so a good definition, define red. So it excludes everything else and only talks about red things within the definition. What is red? 500 years ago. Oh. Okay. This is objective third person vocabulary. Everybody has access to what red is. And you're referring to this, okay? But in my first person subjective, or your first person subjective experience, by red, you might be experiencing this so, well, you know the color of blood. So you see blood like this, and we call it red. I'm like, and I'm seeing this. And I'm like, yeah, red. We both have the same objective word referring to your qualitative experience, but we're having very different experiences.
But you'll never know that
You won't ever know. There's an argument in philosophy called the inverted spectrum. In fact, laying out your spectrum of what you perceive colors, theoretically, you could have all of that inverted. So that, yeah, when everybody would respond, there's no test that you could devise to be like, we'll pick up the red object. You pick it up. The box, right? It's just, you're seeing the box look like this, and I'm seeing it like that. What test? Could you do any brain surgery? Could you see? There's no discrepancies. Everybody keeps stop at the red light, not going through the green light, because he's seeing that objective word in a very different way than you. That's one problem. You're right in the sense that's because color seems to be a subjective phenomenon. Science doesn't like that. It sounds mysterious. It's like I have no access to it. Are you kidding me? Like, why should I even think that's real? Science wants to carve off any subjective experience and put things in terms of third-person objective vocabulary about what it is. So you're right. 500 years ago, the only definition that we could give is something called an ostensive definition. Well, what do you mean, that? This kind of stuff. That's not great by scientific standards, is it? What do you mean by, I don't know this, okay? But it's like, I don't know what you're experiencing when you... So, in the history of science, what they did is they carved off the subjective. It's irrelevant what you experience, because I can't know what you're experiencing. And science wants to be objective. It doesn't want to remain in the realm of subjectivity. So guess what science does? The world has no color. It's all black and white. So what is color? Wavelengths. What is red? The wavelength of 900 nanometers. I've carved off any subjective experience at all. Now, it doesn't matter what you're experiencing. What is red is simply physical phenomena, objective. It's just 900 nanometers. Everybody can have access to that in equal ways. Is it 900 nanometers?
700.
Shoot. What is 900, by the way?
900 is off the visual spectrum. So
You can't see this. Yeah, 900, 700, pretty close, right?
well, sorry, but this
And you're not doing science. No, we'll just fudge the 900 to 700. Okay. Thank you. We need to be precise in this. We want to do the same thing with all mental phenomena. Then we can have a science of consciousness. What is science? Third, subjective. It's quantitative. It doesn't rely on subjective, qualitative And if everything is physical, everything in theory should be able to be, all of this should be shown to be really irrelevant or illusory, and everything should be able to be reduced to objective third-person vocabulary. Physical vocabulary. Physics. Okay, here's what Mary doesn't know. Mary is a brilliant person, right, from the reading. And she's really good at physics. She's raised in a black and white room. She has no... And one of her specialties that she learns is the physics of color and optics, vision, and stuff like that. And assuming that physicalism is true, then we would say, suppose she learns everything there is to know about color and seeing color. She can break down the whole physics and mechanics of it all. And we're going to, second assumption, there's nothing more to learn. She's learned everything there is to know about color. Then what is it, on her 18th or 21st birthday, she's let out the black and white room. Somebody gives her a red rose. In the story, what's her reaction? She's like, exactly what I thought and learned. She doesn't say that. What does she say? She learned something new. What's the new thing that she learns? Sort of close to going. So suppose she learns everything about how color will affect sensation. She's still let out of the room and given a red rose, and she's shocked. She learns something new. But by supposition, if physicalism is true, she shouldn't learn anything new. She knows everything there is to know about color. She should not be shocked. She should be saying, yeah, that's confirmed. She learns what it's like to experience red. Oh, that's what it's like. That means that's a new fact. She didn't learn. But if by assumption physicalism is true, and she learned by assumption all facts about color, she should not be being surprised or learning any new facts. Ceteris paribus. Therefore, learns a new fact, physicalism is false. That's basically what Mary doesn't know. All of this is anti-reductive. So that's to show that it doesn't matter how advanced our physics and our science gets, and technology, you can never reduce consciousness to physics.
Would that be considered new experience, though? Because if she knew scientifically all the physical, it'll be just experience.
That's fine. Then she should be like, experience confirms everything that I know. She would not be shocked.
Yeah, but she could never relate that 700 millimeters.
Then she learned something new. But by supposition, there is nothing new to learn if physicalism is true. Now, somebody can argue, well, that just wouldn't happen. But if you understand modal logic, if physicalism is true in every possible world that you can imagine. Strength is modal strength. So therefore, if you can think of a thought experiment, another world, like Mary's world, in which she's raised in, and physicalism isn't true, then physicalism in this world is not true. That's how modal arguments work. So it doesn't matter. And there's also logical zombies. I love this one. You ever heard about the logical zombies? These are all qualia anti-reductionist arguments in philosophy of mind. If mind and consciousness can just be reduced to brain, then we could just study the brain and stuff like that. Then that would mean that two identical brains and bodies would produce the same mental phenomena, just like functionalism, right? Implement the program in the exact same manner, you'll get the same type of mental thoughts and stuff like that. So it says, consider a world in which there's a replica of you, identical physically in every way, but it lacks consciousness. It's a zombie. How does that refute physicalism? Physicalism basically is going to say that not just in this world that we live in, but in every possible world that you can think of in which you don't produce contradictions, if mind and consciousness can be reduced to the physical brain, then if you produce a physical replica, it will have the same mental phenomena. But because you can think of an example without contradicting yourself, i.e. a possible world, where, yeah, but I can imagine somebody being physically identical to me, but they lack consciousness. You've refuted physically. These are really strange. You have to study modalism and modal strengths. But basically, in philosophy, the way it works is the lowest level of truth is empirical truths. For example, turns out in our physical universe, there are no pink flying unicorns. However, it's not logically impossible. God could have constructed a world in which there were pink flying unicorns. It is impossible, logically impossible, to have married bachelors. That's stronger than... So there are no married bachelors in this universe, and no scientific committee will ever fund my research project. Yeah, but there's so many planets out there, we might just find them, right? It's like, no, it's logically impossible. I don't even need to empirically look, okay? Why? Because logical truths are much stronger than empirical truths. And then it goes up higher into modal metaphysical truths, right? So there's different levels of... So, no, I don't have to sit and do brain surgery and study neuroscience to figure this stuff out. Why? Because that's empirical truths. That's the lowest level of truth. Philosophers go up into the modal, the logical and metaphysical worlds to think out these thought experiments. Because it doesn't matter how our physical universe turns out, once you secure certain logical or metaphysical truths, that will hold across every possible universe or world that you can imagine. So that's why they do logical zombies, these conceivability arguments and stuff like that. Well, let's turn to another argument, John Searle's. In fact, I saw a video of John Searle. He's going to be able to say it much better than, not Google, YouTube. I found an article today. It said, so cool. Google is a cult. Did you know that? Is Google a cult? DuckDuckGo is the best. It doesn't track your information. It doesn't get reported to deep state. I'm going to do this. This is what my search engine was on. Philosophy of mind, and then I'll find Joe Rogan. Like, that guy can do philosophy. That guy is a tool. I'm going to do a podcast where I just rip Joe Rogan. You went to YouTube? I hate Joe Rogan. He's like the dumbest meathead I've ever seen in my... It doesn't take any mental horsepower to bring a bunch of freaks onto your show and just ask questions, right? I don't even know how he got so popular, which makes me think that he is an operative of the establishment. And it pisses me off that he's popular, too. That just makes me even more upset. It's like, why is everybody into this idiot? Okay, let's find a non-idiot.
Most people recognize that dualism isn't going to work.
Okay, this is good, and then we'll go into the Chinese room because these are short videos.
The idea that reality divides into these two realms, the mental and the physical.
He's up at Berkeley.
You've got the Jews' monism. See, Descartes counted up to 2, and everybody else thinks, well, that's wrong. Let's only count up to 1.
So
well,
it's
my
John
message
Searle.
is don't start counting, but that comes later. So we count up to 1, and then you divide, you choose up sides. It's one team are the idealists. They think everything's really mental. There aren't many of those guys. And what they think everything is material, physical. And
God, I love his bookshelf. That's like my house.
How do you do it? How do you give a materialistic account of pain? Well, the behaviorist said it's all just behavior. It's your actual and possible behavior. So to be in pain is just to cry out or be disposed to cry out or whatever. It's a silly view, but you can see how people would get desperate. If I believe it's going to rain, then that can only be, then my belief has to be constituted by the fact that I'll carry an umbrella, for example. Now, there are lots of problems with behaviorism. And the most obvious problem is it just seems to leave out the mind. It seems like you have to feign anesthesia. You got to pretend to be anesthetized if you're going to be a behaviorist. But there are a lot of technical difficulties with it as well. I mean, for example, if
You can't have you knocked out if there's no mind being knocked out. You just pretend.
My disposition to carry an umbrella. Well, that'll only work if you think, well, I don't want to get wet. I got to have a desire. So now it looks like in order to explain belief, you got to have desire. And in order to explain desire, you got to have belief.
Oh my gosh, is it?
So then came the next grade.
Is it almost time?
Which was to
Yeah.
say, well,
Hold on.
really, it isn't.
I want to show you the Chinese room argument.
There is
Man, I didn't. We'll end with this one.
Opposed to. Humans opposed to computational theory of the mind. Use computers to simulate the human mind. And there are different theories about that. One theory says, well, you can simulate the mind as you can simulate vision. I call that weak artificial intelligence, or weak AI. There's a much stronger view that says, no, if you got a simulation, one that can pass the Turing test, behave just like a human being, then it doesn't just simulate the mind, you have literally created a mind. If you design a program that can simulate the human mind so that other human beings couldn't tell the difference between the behavior of the computer and the behavior of a human being, then you've literally created a mind with artificial intelligence. I call that view strong AI. And that view says the mind is to the brain, the program is to the hardware. So we got the right program. It doesn't matter what the hardware is because we created a mind. Creating a program just is creating a mind because the right program with the right inputs and outputs. And the implementation of that program is literally the operation of the mind. That's strong AI. Chinese room refutes that claim. Very simple refutation. Whenever anybody gives you any theory of the mind, always ask, how would it be for me? Chinese room argument says, imagine that you carry out the program, which is supposed to be the program of the mind executing capacity, and take it for something that you don't understand. I don't understand Chinese, so I use Chinese. If you understand Chinese, take something different. Take care of Swahili or something you don't understand.
That's the Chinese room.
I am locked in a room. And in this room are a lot of boxes of Chinese symbols. I also have a rule book written in English that tells me what to do with symbols.
Your boxes.
Now, I get in little batches of Chinese symbols, and I follow the rulebook that tells me what I'm supposed to do with those. I go through all these steps, and I give back little batches of Chinese symbols. Now, unknown to me, the people outside the room call the little batches they give me questions, and the little batches I give them answers. The rulebook they call the computer program, and the boxes of symbols that I use they call the database. Me, they call the computer, like the central processing unit. So I'm there, and I get in the question, I follow the rules of the program, and I give back answers. I give back answers to the questions I need. But now, I don't know anything. I don't understand a word. We suppose that they get so good at writing the program, I get so good at shuffling the symbols that after a while I pass the Turing test. My answers are indistinguishable from a native Chinese speaker. Okay, now here's the point. No matter how good the program is, no matter how effective I am at carrying out the program, no matter how my behavior simulates that, I don't understand. And if I don't understand Chinese on the basis of implementing the program, neither does any other digital computer on the basis, because that's all a computer has. A computer has a set of rules for manipulating symbols. You can see the power of this if you contrast what it's like for me to answer questions in English and what it's like for me to answer questions in Chinese. Imagine these guys also ask me questions in English. My answers will be indistinguishable from a native English speaker, but I am a native speaker. My answer to questions in Chinese are indistinguishable from a native Chinese speaker because I've been programmed. On the outside, I look exactly the same. I'm answering questions in English, I'm answering questions in Chinese. It's totally different on the inside.
But he's not intelligent or conscious of Chinese.
On the outside, but on the inside, I don't understand Chinese at all. It's just meaningless symbols. So what's that difference? If it looks the same on the outside, what's the difference on the inside? And the answer, again, I think is obvious. I know what these words mean. In English, I know I have meanings attaching to them. Now, in Chinese, all I've got is
Syntax.
symbols, formal syntactical objects. But now that's all any computer.
To understand meaning
So the distinction
is semantics.
between the computer and the mind is that the computer just manipulates formal symbols, syntax, syntactical objects, whereas mind has something in addition, the symbols, that meaning. That's not a weakness of the computer. That's why we use computers. You can forget about the meaning and just go with the syntax, just go with the meaningless symbols. But if you're talking about human mind, the essential thing about the mind is...
Stop.